Is it live?
We are live now.
Thank you. Very good evening, my dear viewers. All who are already logged into our bandwagon of Education Pe Charcha, I very much welcome you on this very, very momentous occasion. As much as we are celebrating the Golden Jubilee session of Education Pe Charcha, and on this very, very special occasion, from the very core of my heart, I extend my deepest thanks to Sri Pramod Kumar Jha, who was instrumental behind opening this particular channel, and consequently he has been he deserves all such of kudos for manifestation of this particular program on this very important channel. Then of course our very, very valued partner Dr. Shri Surendra Pathak ji, for rendering all sort of assistance, for facilitating this particular the manifestation of this particular program on this channel. And of course Sabya Pathak ji and Chandan Odao, and today Rupak Pathak ji, the youngest daughter of very, very esteemed Professor Dr. Surendra Pathak ji, who on account of some inconvenience at the end of Sabya Pathak, she has shouldered all responsibilities. My dear viewers, indeed it becomes very much incumbent on my part at this very crucial juncture to just to share with you the sort of my own enthusiasm, in as much as I serendipitously stumbled upon this particular idea that I should be conducting this program to educate the nation, even though in its own microcosmic manner. And today, on the occasion of this 50th session, I really my delight, my ecstasy is absolutely indescribable, because those who are, of course, those who have been our viewers, you all would reckon with the fact that every weekend we are conducting this program, and we keep on inviting all topmost achievers from myriad field of specialization. If you people can recall, my dear viewers, we have already had the great privilege, the bestowal of divine grace to invite such topmost intellectuals like the Honorable Chief Election Commissioner of Bharat Barsha, means former most illustrious Chief Commissioner ever, Shri V.S. Sampath sir. Of course, topmost IAS officers like Sri Anand Singh ji, Doctors Jain Singh ji, then of course there are so many vice chancellors. We began this particular session with Dr. Jagannath Patnaik ji, the Honorable Vice Chancellor of ICFI, and likewise we have had all sort of distinguished guests to grace and bless Education Pe Charcha. So indeed, it has been a very heartening experience for me as a convener of Education Pe Charcha to be able to deliver something good for the nation. My dear viewers, as you all would recollect or would reckon with this fact, that this Golden Jubilee celebration was very much on last Saturday, wherein we have had an immeasurable pleasure to invite our very, very distinguished guest, His Excellency, the Ambassador of Bharat Barsha, Sri Ashok Sajjanhar sir, who already has had an overall experience of more than 3 decades, in serving as in the embassies of in Indian embassies abroad, culminating in that of his holding the position of ambassador of so many different countries, as we'll be knowing it very, very, very shortly. So today, my dear viewers, we are going to have a very, very comprehensive discussions on foreign policies and international relations, and therefore we have got one of the stalwarts to educate us, to educate our viewers, and thereby to educate the nation about the various ins and outs of foreign policy and international relations. I visited few of his videos and of course few of his writings, and I can watch this particular fact that none else but he alone could be the best man to grace and bless today's Golden Jubilee celebration of Education Pe Charcha. So therefore, from the deep core of my heart, I welcome our very, very distinguished guest today, His Excellency, my dear viewers, those of you who would be already knowing it, those who are still to know, for them, His Excellency is a term we use for Honorable President, for the Prime Minister, for the governors, and then only for the ambassadors. That makes ambassadors, or those who have adorned the position of ambassador, all the more important to us. So therefore, without wasting any much of our time, today it is a little bit prolonged session, because I assure you that it is going to be one of the most comprehensive discussions on foreign policy. My dear viewers, I being an author of The Making of Narendra Modi, Unmaking of Jawaharlal, the first book written in the Republic in the wake of abrogation of Article 370 of Indian Constitution, actually I try to trace the foreign policy trajectory of Bharat Varsha since our independence. And this fact I had the pleasure of just confiding in our very, very distinguished guest today, His Excellency, the Ambassador Shri Ashok Sajjanhar Sahab. So now straight away a little bit introduction before our question and answer session begins. And I once again reiterate my reassurance to all my viewers that this is going to be a very, very electrifying discussion on, on foreign policy, nation's foreign policy and international relations, and I assure you one of the most comprehensive ever to be discussed on educational Charcha today. My dear viewers, His Excellency, I again use this word, Ambassador Shri Ashok Sajjanhar Sahab actually was the ambassador of Kazakhstan, Sweden, and Latvia, worked in various embassies in Washington, D.C., in Geneva, in Moscow, Brussels, and Tehran, apart from holding other, ambassadorial means other assignments in different embassies. Now, presently, he is holding a very, very esteemed position of being the president of the Institute of Global Studies, New Delhi. So now you can well understand, you have understood by now, my viewers, why His Excellency, the Ambassador Sri Ashok Sajjanhar Sahab holds so much importance and significance for education pe Charcha, because today we have chosen him to educate the nation through all his kaleidoscopic vision and perspective of foreign policy, because he has been shaping the foreign policy of India. Therefore, he is the best person to educate all of us. Sir, I very much welcome you. I very much welcome respected, His Excellency Dr. Shri Ashok ji. And with the very first question, sir, this, hereby my first question goes to you. Sir, walking down the memory lane, could you share some of the incidents from your sophomoric days to enlighten our viewers, which contributed to your finally graduating into a diplomat, culminating in your evolving as an illustrious ambassador of different countries? I welcome Sri Ashok Sajjanhar Sahab. Sir, you are most welcome today to grace and bless our education pe Charcha.
Thank you very much, Professor Vivekananda ji, for this, first of all, for the invitation, and then secondly, for this very gracious introduction. I'm truly delighted to be here on your program, on your show. And let me also take this opportunity to extend my warmest congratulations and felicitations to you and the whole team. You have mentioned a large number of partners as far as your initiative is concerned. And all of you have been doing phenomenal work. So my heartfelt congratulations and compliments to you for what you are doing. As you said very rightly, meaning when we are serving, when we are as ambassadors in different countries, then of course, you are addressed as His Excellency. Not, this is not reference to the different individuals who might be there, but because the ambassadors, they represent the president of the country in that particular station. For instance, when I was ambassador to Kazakhstan, then it is, there is what is known as a copy of an agreement, which is before an ambassador joins a particular station, the minister will send out a message to his counterpart in that other country, saying that the president of the country, the Indian president, he is pleased to appoint an individual A as my personal representative to your country. And when this agreement is received from the other country, this is known as the agrément. It's a French word. So then that paper, which is signed by the president himself or herself in person, that is given to the ambassador. And then there is a special ceremony that takes place, like I was in ambassador to Kazakhstan or ambassador to Sweden. So there in Sweden, I handed over, there's a ceremony. You hand over this communication to the king of that country. I handed it over to the king. And that means that the individual has been appointed as the personal representative. And it is for that reason that the ambassadors are normally addressed as His Excellency or Her Excellency. So I thought, since you had mentioned Vivekananda Jhaji as to that, these are some of the individuals who are, given that title. So I thought, let me share a little background as far as this is concerned. Now, you have spoken, you have asked me about my personal experience as to what motivated me to join the Indian diplomatic service. Well, I was always keen to do something. Of course, I always wanted to come into the government service, and particularly into the diplomatic service, because right from the very beginning, I realized that, there is no greater joy and no greater privilege that an individual can have than, in terms of representing your own country. And of course, when you are in different places, in different positions, of course, when you are as the ambassador, of course, you are the first person in the embassy in that particular country of your state. But that was always my ambition. That was always my desire. And as you mentioned, I spent more than 3 decades in the Indian diplomatic service. And I can say with all both conviction as well as humility that I don't think there is any other work or service or job that is more rewarding, that is more satisfying than that of a diplomat. Because I think you have a possibility of contributing greatly in a manner where you can see the results of your work, your hard work in front of you. Of course, when you are dealing with multilateral issues, not the bilateral issues. Bilateral is when we are talking about relations between 2 different countries. When I was in Thailand, then you are working towards improving political and security and trade and economic relations between those 2 countries. But when you are working on a multilateral level, and I've had the privilege of working in different multilateral fora also, like the World Trade Organization. We just 2 days ago, we saw what was, that our Commerce Industry Minister, Mr. Piyush Goyal, he was in Geneva, he was negotiating on behalf of India in the WTO. And I had the privilege of negotiating for India for more than 5 years on behalf of India. And so I think that is both very rewarding, very in terms of enhancing your own understanding of the country that you represent, and also very what you are able to achieve. You are able to see the results right in front of you. So that is what motivated me. Maybe if I can just share one particular experience that, in right now, the system of examination is a little different. When we appeared, and I appeared in early 70s, it was very different. Before that, I had, for a variety of reasons, I had worked in a few, I had worked as an officer in, Bank of India. And I was heading a branch when I decided to go in for this exam. I'll not go into the detail, but basically to suggest that I have done my master's in physics and honors in physics. But when I decided to appear for the exam, I thought that since there had been a gap in when I left my post graduation in physics and I was taking the exam, I took up subjects which I thought were very conceptual and where I was interested. So I took up subjects like jurisprudence, I took up subjects like sociology, I took up subjects like Indian history and British constitutional history and European history, because these are issues. History is a subject, although I've been a science student, but history has been a subject that I have always been interested in, both Indian history as well as world history. So I took up subjects not which I had studied in college, which was physics and chemistry and mathematics and others, but subjects that I was interested in myself. And well, I was able to get positive results. So this is a very long answer to a very short question that you had given. So I'm sorry to take up so much time, but I
No,
thought
sir.
let me share at the beginning a few personal thoughts.
Thanks a lot, sir, for just walking down the memory lane and just having had a pip at it and just share all your background. We are really delighted to know about your expertise in so many different subjects. And sir, just since I also know so many IS officers and even few of those who have been into Indian Foreign Service, I have never seen people, studying in so much depth, like studying jurisprudence, European history and Indian history. Of course, indeed, it is really a great pleasure to be introduced to such an illustrious portfolio of yours. Sir, it's so important, my dear viewers. It becomes very important here to suggest, that a very important fact that sir had just said, and he just shared with all of us, that you see, since he was very much inclined to be someone to represent the nation, I recall one of the speeches of the greatest constitutional jurist the country had ever produced. So, late Shri Palki Balaji, while he came to Calcutta, we just flocked to hear him, deliver his scintillating speech in Netaji Indoor Stadium. He had also described about the ambassadors and tried to, trace out the genesis of ambassadorial work, and wherein he had mentioned that in the old days when ambassadors of one place would go to another place, the first thing is that, the place where he would go, the people would just listen to the message and he was killed. The ambassador, or you can say the messenger, was instantly killed. So that was the way it evolved. The journey of ambassador or emissaries evolved. Sir, so nice of you to have thrown light into your background. I'm straightway coming to the next very important question, sir. Sir, actually, this is something might not be pertaining to your background, Mr. Your career graph or career background, but nonetheless, it is very important because it is a quintessential part of the foreign policy of this country. That is why I feel like asking you, because you are the best person to explicate on this. So that's why I'm putting this question to you, sir. So coming to the next question, what do you think were the reasons for the failure of Panchsheel in Indo-China relations and the role of the then ambassador of India in China, K.M. Panikkar, in jeopardizing India's national interest in the then independent Tibet, especially in the context of Girija Shankar Bajpayee's role as an honest observer of India's losing its strategic heft in Tibet. Your take on this, sir, please.
Yeah, this is a very important subject that you have raised. And of course, I could go on and on this. This is, it could be dealt with at great length and in great detail. But let me put it very, succinctly and pointedly. And I think the most fundamental reason for this was that I feel that although Panditji was aware of the risk and the threat and the danger that India faced as far as China is concerned, but he allowed his more liberal ideas and values to cloud and shroud both his judgment as well as the advice that he got from his counselors, particularly as far as, Sardar Patel was concerned. I think Sardar Patel had warned him in both in writing as well as in word that China is a country that is not to be trusted. But, once we embarked on this whole policy of Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai and refused to believe that China would ever take any action against India, I think the writing should have been clear on the wall that when India gave asylum to His Holiness the Dalai Lama in 1959, and China thought that it was a ploy by India to stir instability and to stir, protest and violence as far as Tibet is concerned, that this was going to happen. And for Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, the then Prime Minister, saying that I have given instructions to the army that they should throw out the Chinese from our part of the, from our side of the border, and without having prepared for it. So, there are many reasons in terms of also parochial interests when some of the commanders of the army were posted and those who did not have adequate experience, but because of the fact that, it was General Kaul who was put in position, who was put in command when he did not have the requisite experience. Also, when he fell ill, when this conflict was going on, but still the Prime Minister continued with him. He continued to be heading the operations, particularly in the northeastern part of the country are concerned. So I think it was a string of follies at the level of the top leadership that, resulted in the 1962 conflict and in, the fact you asked about Panchsheel, which was signed at the Bandung Conference in 1954 in Indonesia, that I think right from that time, China has had this, its own hegemonistic aspirations to dominate the first Asia and then to dominate the world. And it was just biding its time. You know what Deng Xiaoping said later, that first you focus on strengthening yourself and don't keep your head down, keep your head low, make yourself strong, and only when you are strong, then only you should rise up to challenge the global order. And that is exactly what is being done now, particularly, from 2008 onwards, when we had China hosting the first Olympics, when we had the international economic crisis, the financial crisis. And after that, of course, when Xi Jinping came to power in 2012-13, and he launched this Belt and Road Initiative. So I think China had always had it that China was not willing to look upon or treat India as an equal, but as a subordinate power, because it has always felt, that it is the middle kingdom and all the countries around it have to pay obeisance to it, have to be surrogate powers, have to be, subordinate to it, and have to, pay tribute to it, and not try to be its equal. They have to understand their place in the hierarchy in which China is right at the top and all the other countries are at a much lower level. So, it could have been delayed for some time, but I don't think it could have been avoided. But the follies that we committed at that time I think that made it, that created two problems, that we did not prepare ourselves well at all. Because after the independence, India started thinking, too seriously that we have to follow the path of non-violence. We have to follow the path of ahimsa. There is no need to have an army. There is no need to have defense forces, etc. So we didn't pay any attention to that. And secondly, we were not at all realistic when we thought that China will not go on an offensive and launch a war against India.
Hello, sir. Voice has inaudible.
Yeah, no, that was basically it. What I wanted to say, that it was the follies committed by our leadership that resulted in the tearing down. And even today, what we see is that China only pays lip service to the principles of the Panchshil. It never follows it, and of course, in our discussions, I can give you many examples that what China says, that we have to follow the international law, the global law, the United Nations Charter. But it is, when it suits its interests, it is the first in violating the principles of the United Nations while it sort of, tries to tell all the other countries, particularly United States, etc., that you are not following the principles of the United Nations. Over to you.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot for throwing such adequate light on a very important issue. But I have got a question based on your explication, based on your own explanation. Sir, I would like to ask you a question, because you have been an ambassador and you have been into foreign service for decades together. As you were discussing about China, it just struck my mind, because at that point in time, Mr. K.M. Panikkar was the ambassador. And I think that you are the best person to corroborate my observation. I think that Mr. Panikkar was the ambassador during the nationalistic regime of China, which was headed by Chiang Kai-shek, as well as he continued to become ambassador even during the communist regime. I think it was unprecedented. Even today, I'm not very sure. So how could it happen that the same person continues to be the ambassador in two different regime? So there was some sort of foul play. This is what we do suspect. Your take on this, sir?
Yeah, this is, you are right. Meaning, I think it is, let me put it this way, that it is unusual. It is not unheard of. That has also, happened in the past. For instance, even if you look at when the Soviet Union disintegrated in 1991, we had one ambassador, and he continued to be the ambassador of the Russian Federation, after that. So, as I said, it is unusual, but I think if that person enjoys the, so to say, the confidence of the powers that be in the country, in the sending country, then of course he can continue to be there. But of course, we had others also who went as our ambassadors to China, other people also. And I think from our ambassadors also, there were different views that were being projected. Some of them, they were so overwhelmed by what was happening in China that they also completely, totally subscribed to the views of Panditji, that our relations will continue to be very vibrant, our relations will continue to be very strong and powerful. But there were also others who advised Panditji, saying that, in 1954, we signed this treaty on Tibet, trade with Tibet, and that, the access that we used to have to Lhasa and to other places that was denied to us by the Chinese communists. And this was brought to the notice of Panditji. I have seen those files myself, in which our representatives, both in Lhasa as well as in Beijing, they kept on advising the ministry, the headquarters, Pandit Nehru. At that time, he was also the foreign minister. For all these 17 years from 1947 to 64, he continued to be also the foreign minister of the country. He held that portfolio. So there were messages that were sent to him saying that, China is not abiding by the terms of the agreement that we have reached with them. And, while at the political level, they might be making all the correct noises, but when it comes to the implementation on the ground, there is not good cooperation that we were getting from China. So all these indications that we were getting from Beijing, from Lhasa, and from elsewhere, they were quite disregarded, because I think Panditji had, he had these woolly ideas that China is never going to act against us. In fact, Pandit Nehru was the one who exposed China, who in fact, took China onto the world stage. In 1954, you would remember that in Bandung, he was the one who introduced Chawanlai to the whole world. So he thought that since, and even before India's independence, we had organized this Asian Relations Conference in April of 1947. And there also we had tried to project, although China had not, became a communist state only in 1949, and so to say, became independent in 1949 from Chiang Kai-shek, from the Kuomintang party. So what Pandit Nehru said, that China thought that China would be so beholden to India and to Panditji himself that they would never take a step of this nature. So I think after October 62, when the conflict took place and India was, completely, totally defeated by China, I think this was such a shock, both psychological, emotional, and of course, as far as the country is concerned, it was such a shock that Pandit Nehru was never really able to recover from that shock that he got.
Thanks a lot, sir. Actually, in this very context, though I wouldn't be prolonging this issue because we have so many questions to discuss. But sir, I would just like to bring to your kind attention that Pandit Jawaharlal, it was a blunder, as you yourself, confessed and you yourself articulated. It was an absolute blunder on the part of Jawaharlal Nehru, because he was just heeding only one, a particular part of version of what the Panikkar was trying to articulate or trying to convey, but he had to absolutely ignore the advice of Dr. Girija Shankar Bajpayee ji, because Girija Shankar Bajpayee ji was time and time again, he was warning Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru that things were not that rosy, and India day after day was losing its overall strategic heft in Tibet. So Jawaharlal Nehru had just even though he wanted Girija Prasad Bajpayee ji to remain in as a general secretary, as a foreign ministry,
Secretary General in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, yes.
Affairs, but nevertheless he never paid heed to Girija Shankar Bajpayee ji, and that is what the heavy price we paid, because Tibet, upon which we should have had some sort of sovereignty, because that's what we got it by way of a buffer state from Britain. We just lost it because of Jawaharlal Nehru's whimsicality. It's well and good that he was shocked and all that, but he was naive to buy that particular argument that China would be very friendly to him, because he wanted to sell all this concept of Panchshil, Hindu Chini Vai in Bandung conference and all that. So this is what exactly, do you agree with me, or you beg to differ?
No, I agree with you completely. I think it was Panditji, his sort of, incompetent leadership as far as this issue is concerned, and also Krishna Menon at that time. And total disregard of, all the warnings that had been given as far as Sardar Patel are concerned, Girija Shankar Bajpayee are concerned, that China is not going to be a reliable, trustworthy, credible friend as far as India is concerned. But he completely disregarded all these warnings that were given to him by, the other thinkers and experts who had a much better feel of, what China was all about. So I think it is as a result of that, there are maybe two or three particular aspects that Pandit Nehru could be held, particularly guilty of. One is, of course, relations with China. The other is in terms of taking the issue of Kashmir to the UN, General Assembly and asking for a UN Security Council and asking for a decision from them. And third, that is spoken about also quite extensively, is the fact that India was offered a place, a permanent position on the UN Security Council. And we declined it, and we said that, China has the first claim on that seat. And so China, was given at that time, it was the Kuomintang, the Chiang Kai-shek, and then that got transferred to the People's Republic of China in 1978. So I think these are a few of the aspects that Pandit Nehru is particularly held, guilty of, that if he had acted differently, the position of India would have been very, very different today than what it is.
Indian salutations to you, my dear viewers. Today, in fact, I was looking forward to getting a confirmation of this very important fact, because Congress party has been trying to stir controversy on this very important issue as to whether India indeed considered the permanent place to China or not. Because Congress party's denial that Jawaharlal Nehru never took any such step has been, stands absolutely dispelled by one of the experts, the former ambassador, that this is the fact. Sir, I really bow down to you, because you are the first person I was looking forward to getting this fact confirmed, because whether indeed India had, offered China, the very permanent, permanent place in the Security Council, or not, you confirm this fact. I'm so very glad, my dear viewers. So this particular fact stands testified and absolutely corroborated by one of the very, very, stalwarts of foreign policy, in today on Education Pe Charcha, that indeed India had considered the place of Security Council in favor of China when it straightway came to it, and India today would not be running from pillar to post in search of getting that particular position. So once losing it because of humongous blunder on the part of the so-called first Prime Minister of India, India has been continuously paying the price for it. Thanks a lot, sir, for confirming this fact. I'm coming to the next important question. In the wake of the current diplomatic crisis, sir, I'm just coming to the contemporary times before I again switch over to the past. Of course, to your glorious career. In the wake of the current diplomatic crisis, in the wake of Nupur Sharma Rao, don't you think we failed to project our views as staunchly as we could have? Especially in terms of dubbing Nupur Sharma as a fringe element was the vindication of our diplomatic deficiency rather than a diplomatic deafness in projecting our stand to the Arab countries. Your take on this, please.
On the Nupur Sharma issue, let me put it this way. I think maybe because it is such a sensitive matter, and possibly we did not wish to get into an argument, with the countries, with the Gulf countries, with the Muslim countries, etc. And that is why, this action was taken. But I think it would be right to say that what Nupur Sharma mentioned, as I understand it, it is from the scriptures of Islam. It is from the Hadith. It might not be from the Quran as such, but it definitely is a part of the Hadith. she is not the first one to say it. There are Muslim scholars and academics who have said the same thing, who have spoken the same thing. But I think, what was really found objectionable was not the content, but the tone and tenor in which it was mentioned. But I think this also should have been mentioned, that it was in the heat of a debate, of a TV debate, where there can be sort of, tempers can fly and people can get agitated. Along with that, I think it's also important to remember that, when you are criticizing or condemning one particular statement or one particular fact or one particular action, then similar statements and comments, which are denigrating to the Hindu gods, they also need to be condemned and criticized with the same fervor and with the same vigor. That having been said, so, I find this whole hypocrisy and this whole double standards, quite unacceptable. The third aspect is that, after this statement has been made and action has been taken, and Nupur Sharma herself has also withdrawn her statement, and she has said that, if she has caused any, harm or offense to anyone, then she has expressed her regrets in that regard. All that having been said, there are all these threats of, killing, threats of murder, and all the other unthinkable aspects that, threats of those are being, she's being subjected to all those threats. We also have seen threat from Al-Qaeda saying that, as a result of this, we are going to bomb Delhi and Gujarat and UP and all these other places. And yesterday, the attack that has taken place in Kabul on that Gurudwara, there also the Islamic State has said that this attack is because of the insult to the Prophet. Now, the Sikhs have nothing at all, the Gurudwara has nothing at all to do with this sort of thing. So, this sort of an argument that is being made is totally untenable and ridiculous. So, I think when we are talking about all this whole matter, then the whole world should be condemning these statements also, these threats that are coming from Al-Qaeda, groups like Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. And in fact, in that letter of Al-Qaeda, they have quoted from the Quran. That means even a terrorist organization can get justification for its actions from the holy book of the Muslims. And I think this should definitely be a matter which the Muslims should also be objecting to. But what I find very strange is that there is no criticism or condemnation of all the threats that have been coming from the elements in India and also Al-Qaeda. So this definitely this double hypocritical approach that definitely needs to be condemned, and that definitely needs to be criticized.
Thanks a lot, sir. I just once again salutations to you. My viewers, very, very incumbent on our part to take a note of this fact that here is the man who held such the highest position in the country, but nevertheless, the sort of secularists that we have today, I must tell you, my dear viewers, even reading Dr. Pratap Bhanu Mehta came to me as a big, huge shock. These so-called left seculars, they are concocting all these facts. They are trying to present their partisan view and not trying to look straightway into the eyes of Islamic vandals, Islamic predators. This predatory Islamic tactics must stop. because we are not living in the ancient or in the medieval times. We are in 21st century. But nevertheless, how long, as our honored guest today, one of the topmost ambassadors of this country, is so unambiguously and candidly making his point distinctly clear that how the sort of uncivility has come to be institutionalized, and Hindus basically, as I keep on writing every day, that we should no more be apologists. Because of our being apologists, because of this Nehruvian secularism having been so diabolically institutionalized in the Republic, Hindus, it has been absolutely inimical to the interest of the majority community of this country. And as people have begun waking up since 2014 to even to an infinitesimal degree, that has become a matter of tremendous concern, and it has been adequately and correspondingly disconcerting to the aggressive element of their community. And that is why they once again they are trying to browbeat the majority community into submission. Nupur Sharma, I would like to make it absolutely clear, is only a pretext. The real cause was just to browbeat Modi government and Hindus into submission. Because Nupur Sharma, as our honored guest, being one of the most elite persons of this country, when he is trying to authoritatively reassert the fact, that should be taken at the face value. Hindus should take a note, majority community should take a note that, we should no more be browbeaten into submission, because if this happens, it happened with Kamlesh Tiwari, if it happens with Nupur Sharma, then we have no right to leave. Because being it is the nation of the aboriginals, Hindus, since time immemorial. And if we still continue to be browbeaten into submission, we have no right to leave. This is what the lesson that Nupur Sharma episode invariably and unequivocally, teaches all of us. Thank you, sir. I salute you yet again, because we have the rarest of rare people like you, who just tries to speak in a very straight-cut manner without, concocting the facts, without being, purportedly without being polished. Because these left seculars, they are trying to appear as polished people, because they simply keep mum on the overall the vandalism, overall barbarity of a particular community. But when it comes to the Hindu community being the casualty, they absolutely keep mum. That sort of tendency, which has come to be institutionalized in the Republic, that must be forthwith dispensed with. We have to call a spade. And sir, once again, please forgive me, my viewers, but I should say that I really reverentially salute our honored guest today, because he has learned to call a spade. Thank you, sir, once again. Coming to the next very important
could I just add one sentence to what you have said, that, not only at the national level, but at the global level also, this is an issue that needs to be raised. And we need to sort of, bring it to the attention of the people. And I think that is what is being done. What is called Hindu phobia. That means the hatred and the discrimination against Hindus of the world, and not only against Hindus, against Sikhs. For instance, you see, in the wake of 9/11, as far as so many of the Sikhs, how they were persecuted, how action was taken against them. So the Indian government has taken it up in the United Nations. In fact, there was a debate yesterday, and our ambassador at the UN, Mr. Ambassador T.S. Tirumurthy, he has said that, we keep on speaking about Islamophobia, etc., and about the hatred towards and the persecution of the Abrahamic religions, that is Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. But the other religions, there is a phobia against them also. For instance, against Hinduism, against Sikhism, against Jainism. So those also should be taken note of. That also should be taken cognizance of. So the Indian government has brought this issue to the fore also in front of the global community, and has been working towards acceptance and recognition of non-Abrahamic religions the persecution of non-Abrahamic religions like Hinduism and Sikhism and the others. So I thought just for sake of completeness, I will mention this aspect also.
Great, sir. Great, sir, because indeed on this, and definitely it needs to be taken up on a very, very firefighting mode, because we can no longer just keep on pretending that everything is right and just try to present or try to camouflage our face just to appear to be innocent, whereas we are losing ground with the passage of every day. The nation is getting snatched away from the majority community, and this has to be, the entire world community has to be enlightened on this fact. Thanks a lot, sir. Now I'm coming to a very, very important question, and there is very, sir, actually, why do you think our foreign policy over decades was held hostage to the whimsicality of a section of our people? For we only established an overt diplomatic relations with Israel only during Narasimha Rao's era, where our foreign policy trajectory went wrong. Your take on this, sir?
You see, I think there was a lack of confidence in, not only as far as the foreign policy, but as far as the country is concerned. I think your viewers must understand that foreign policy cannot stand independently of the nation. It is really a reflection of the domestic strength and confidence of the country. So if you are domestically, you are confident, you are bold, you are courageous, your economy is doing well, and you are certain about what your idea of India is, then you will be able to speak on international fora with confidence. If you do not have that confidence, then obviously, you will not be able to project your point of view very effectively. So as you said very rightly, in 1992, we had, although our contacts with Israel had been going on for quite some time, even before that, but it was only in 1992 we got the courage to have, to establish diplomatic relations with Israel. And I think what is equally important, if not even more so, that it took 25 years for an Indian Prime Minister to travel from India to Israel, because, they were so afraid as to what our, the Muslim community in India is going to think. And since that has at many times, that has tended to be used as a vote bank. So if you reach out to Israel, then this vote bank might think adversely as far as you are concerned. So that is why, although diplomatic relations were established, although there were exchange of visits, there was trade and visits of delegations that was happening, but the Prime Minister could never muster the courage to go there during this period. And it was only in 2017 that Prime Minister Modi, he became the first Prime Minister to travel to Israel. And he also, I think it's also important to remember that when he traveled, he dehyphenated the relation with Israel and with the Palestinians. So, he did not go to Israel and then to Ramallah, to the capital of where Mohammed Abbas is the Prime Minister of the Palestinian Authority. So he did not go there. He went there again on a separate occasion, but he did not hyphenate it. Hyphenation is basically that when you do something with one country, then you do exactly the same thing with another country, because you do not wish to give the impression of any favoritism. This hyphenation used to be between India and Pakistan, that all the Western leaders, when they used to come to India, they thought it incumbent on their part to also travel to Pakistan, and vice versa. And this practice was given up, I think, the first time when Mr. Clinton came to India in March of 2000. So he came here and he stayed in India for about 5 or 6 days. He traveled to about 5 countries. On his way back, he stopped only at the airport of I think it was Karachi. He stopped at the airport, and from the airport, he made a televised address to the people of Pakistan. He did not go inside Pakistan. He just was at the airport, and from there he flew away. And after that, of course, relations between India and Pakistan, they were dehyphenated. Now, at that time when people used to speak about India, they also used to speak about Pakistan, but not any longer. Now, I think the comparison is done between India and China, because if China is a big economy, big country, very influential, very strong global power, so India is also spoken in the same breath. But coming back to your question of Israel, relations with Israel, it is basically because I think there was apprehension that our domestic Muslim community might take it wrongly and might, not, their votes might not come to the. So there was this sensitivity about the feelings of the Muslim community that no country, no prime minister could gather the gumption or the courage. And it was left to Prime Minister Modi that he traveled there in 2017 after a gap of 25 years of our recognition of Israel as a diplomatic partner. In fact, if you look at Prime Minister Narasimha Rao, he took some very far-reaching decisions during his tenure as Prime Minister from 91 to 96. I think another one was to reach out to Southeast Asia. Our relations with Southeast Asia were not good at all till that time, because Southeast Asia was a part of along with the United States during the Cold War. And since we were perceived to be on the side of the Soviet Union, so our relations with Southeast Asia were not good. So he launched what was known at that time as the Look East policy. Of course, that was upgraded by Prime Minister Modi in November 2014 into the Act East policy. But he was the first one, Prime Minister Narasimha Rao was the first one to start that we start looking and we start having very strong relations with Southeast Asia. Then he also reached out very strongly to Central Asian countries, because they had also become independent after the disintegration of the Soviet Union. So he traveled to two of the most important Central Asian countries, Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan in 1993, and traveled to two others, that is to Kyrgyzstan and to Turkmenistan in 1995. Unfortunately, for the next 20 years from 1995, we were not able to give adequate attention to Central Asia that Mr. Narasimha Rao had started. And again, it was left to Mr. Modi that he visited all the 5 countries of Central Asia in 2015. The prime ministers in between really did not, whether it was Dr. Manmohan Singh, Mr. Vajpayee, still he went to Tajikistan in 2003. But in between, for 20 years, I think we traveled to Central Asia, which has become such an important part of our extended neighborhood, only twice or thrice in about 20 years. And Prime Minister Modi, he went to all these countries in 2015. Then he's traveled to the other countries also in subsequent years.
Thanks a lot. Great, sir. Sorry, please.
No, over to you, please.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thanks a lot, because in fact, sir, you have been giving us so much light into all these sort of questions on these issues. Sir, I'm coming to very, very important, because now once again a question, because since you have been not an ambassador, but of course in the embassy of Moscow as well as in Washington DC, so you are the best person to throw light on this upcoming question. Sir, I'm just coming to a very important non-alignment movement. Why NAM, which was considered as a powerful tool of an independent pressure group? Because if you could recall, the world was bipolar at that point in time. One bloc was led by USA, another by USSR. Now, so now powerful tool of an independent pressure group within bracket, Bandung Conference was the sowing of the seeds for the same. That is what non-aligned movement against USA and USSR in a bipolar world. So your question I would like to ask, sir, that why NAM stood disintegrated. What was the main trigger behind its disintegration when it was such a powerful and a potent instrument, where under all the third world countries had come to be under its umbrella. So why it got disintegrated? Your take on this, sir?
Okay, my perspective on this is slightly different from what you have said. And let me very briefly explain why do I say that. Non-alignment as a policy is very good, because when you are non-aligned, then you don't say that all my positions will be determined by what the Soviet Union is thinking or doing, or what the United States is thinking or doing. No, I will I will look at each issue on the basis of its merits, and then I will take a view on that. Now, non-aligned movement is such that, it comes down to the lowest common denominator. That, if some country has a position to this, they don't agree, so you leave it out. So only at the lowest level where there is agreement. For instance, I'll just give you an example. In 1962, when China attacked India, what did the non-aligned movement do? Nothing. The non-aligned movement said, we will be non-aligned. We will neither take the side of India nor will we take the side of China. They didn't say anything. Similarly, in 1965, the point that I'm making is that the non-aligned movement was of no great benefit to India when India needed it the most. In 1971, when, the Tikka Khan was there and, all this, the raping and killing and murdering and the genocide of the Bengalis was taking place in the then East Pakistan. What did the non-aligned movement do? Did they say anything against Pakistan? No, they did not. So there was no criticism of that. So the point I'm making is that non-alignment as a policy is very good, but non-aligned movement really was, in my view, not of any great help as far as India is concerned. Meaning, of course, if we wanted to advance our own interests and we were the leaders of the non-aligned movement to that extent, and we could utilize that, that I think was good, and we took advantage of that. But once in 1991 we saw the disintegration of the Soviet Union, then you see there was nothing left to be non-aligned from. When you have a multipolar world, meaning I concede that from 1991 till 2001, when you had the 9/11 attacks, that was a unipolar moment. And that is why at that time you had Mr. Primakov, who was the Prime Minister of Russia. He was talking about, RIC, Russia, India, China, that all three of them need to come together, basically to act against the hegemony and the unipolarity of the United States. But after 2001, I think there have been the power of United States started coming down. That was the military power, the military authority. And after 2007, 2008, when we had the international economic crisis, then, of course, economically also, the United States started, its influence and its power, started declining. As a result of that, you have now a multipolar world. So in a multipolar world, you cannot have a policy of non-alignment. And you cannot be with, either one power or the other power, as, the United States and some of the European countries seem to be suggesting. So they are we have said is that our policy, of course, is of strategic autonomy, but also multi-alignment, because we are not going to be in any sort of, exclusive partnerships, but we are going to have, depending upon our interests, we would have relations with different countries. So I think this is the sort of policy that we are following. You would have seen even in the case of the Ukraine-Russia conflict that is going on, we maintain the best of relations with the United States. After all, we are members of the Quad. There have been 4 meetings of the Quad that have taken place over the last 1 year. But still, we are not ready to outright criticize or condemn Russia also. So we want to maintain our relations with them also. So I think there was a particular time when we needed to be non-aligned, but I think in our policy, we have taken that element of strategic autonomy, that we will decide for ourselves what is good for us. And I think India is now too large a country to be a non-aligned. Wherever we are, the world looks at what India is saying and what India is doing. So I think India holds its own position. After all, it is the 5th largest economy in the world. It is 2nd largest in terms of population. You look at, the startups that are coming, the digitalization that is coming in India. You look at the manner in which India has dealt with the COVID-19 pandemic, not only as a health hazard, but also as an economic, the impact on the headwinds as far as the economy is concerned, how India has been able to deal with it. So I think India has made a standing for itself. So it can no longer be a non-aligned country as such. We have to take stands in different situations. We cannot say that we are not with you, we are not with you, we'll just sort of, stand in the middle. That's not it. So I think it was a good policy for those times. But these times are very different and they need a different set of policy matrix. And that is what we are following. Now, I tell you, Dr. Vivekananda, that I have to leave in another 5 minutes because I have engagement. So it's already 1 hour, 10 minutes that we have been having a conversation.
I do appreciate your very, very invaluable time. Coming to the next very important question, because you yourself were an architect of the same. You played a pivotal role in the discussions on Uruguay round of multilateral trade negotiations for India-ASEAN. Could you kindly give us an insight into the same? And after this, one more question. Please, sir.
Okay, as far as Uruguay round is concerned, I think it had a large number of successes. Let us first of all understand that when there are negotiations, I remember, and this is what I used to tell my junior officers, that a successful negotiation is one where all the participants go back equally unhappy and equally dissatisfied. You see, because if there is one group that is happy and the other group that is unhappy, that means the result is not a very balanced one. So I can say that from the Uruguay round, we were able to get a large number of benefits for ourselves, for developing countries, for countries like India, whose contribution to global trade, to world trade is not very large. It is not very high, because we account for barely about 1.6% of international trade. Although in terms of our population, we are about 18% to 20% of the world population. But still, in terms of global trade, we are just about 1.6%. And that is today. When we became independent, we were 0.6%. I remember in 1991, when we started opening up, then we were barely, I think, a little less than 1%. So today, in these last 30 years, we have And of course, now our exports are doing quite well. Last year, for the first time, we had more than $400 billion of exports. And this year also, notwithstanding the COVID-19 pandemic, our exports are doing quite well. So as far as the Uruguay round is concerned, let me say this much, that it is a very technical subject. It's a very legal subject. So, explaining it in simple terms might be a little difficult, but let me just flag 2 or 3 or 4 areas in which India, was able to achieve what it had set out to achieve. Number one was in terms of the dispute settlement system, because earlier in what was known as the GATT, from 1947 till 1995, the global world trade was regulated through what was known as GATT, which is the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. That came into effect in 1947, and it was amalgamated as a part of the WTO text, the World Trade Organization text, in 1995. Earlier, we were dealing only with trade in goods. From 1995 onwards, it also covered trade in services. It also covered intellectual property rights, and it also covered investment measures. So it made it a comprehensive sort of a body. The third aspect was one I mentioned about the dispute settlement. That is very important for developing countries, because developed countries have the strength of their economy, of their exports, that they can force these smaller players to do what they want to do. But these rules are very important for smaller players. We see even domestically, what are the courts and laws? Who are they really beneficial for? For smaller people, those who do not have the power and the authority. So we got a good dispute settlement system. We got an omnibus WTO, World Trade Organization. We included textiles, which was outside the global trade rules. We were able to include that into the WTO. We were able to include agriculture also as a part of the WTO. That has some problems, but I think for countries like us, we get a scheme, a system in which it is regulated by global rules. So that becomes very important for developing countries. And there are a number of other areas like dumping, like subsidies, which we were able to control, and which we were able to clarify the rules as far as the Uruguay round is concerned. So I would say that it was the final result was beneficial as far as India is concerned. And we have seen after that, we have been able to, our domestic production and our exports have also tended to grow with the passage of time.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, sir, for explicating on such a great, marvelous achievement that goes to your credit for working out the framework of, this particular, that is this framework of WTO. Just last question, because of course you are running short of time. We do appreciate your overwhelming preoccupation. This is the last question I would like to ask you, sir, because your opinion indeed matters a lot on this. Sir, in one of the articles in 2017, rather being the first columnist of India, I considered, or I wrote or envisaged Narendra Modi as the Bismarck of the world politics. That is, as you yourself would appreciate, that Otto von Bismarck was one of the greatest diplomats ever born in a millennium, if not more. So how do you think that, especially in the context of this ongoing Ukraine war, when the world leaders had made a beeline, just to have a meeting with Narendra Modi, and they tried to persuade Mr. Modi, to be a mediator to bring this particular ongoing war to a conclusion. So what is your opinion on this? Whether I gave a befitting So, sobriquet, I conferred a befitting sobriquet upon Mr. Modi, or I was somewhere wrong in my own adjudication, in my own evaluation. Your take on this, sir?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think, meaning I have not come across this, this equivalence between Bismarck and Prime Minister Modi. Now, Bismarck was the architect of German unification in 1871. And at that time, Germany was divided into a large number of small principalities, small kingdoms, and they were not united. And his basic contribution was getting all of them together, and the rise of Germany as a major, not only a European, but sort of a global power. And in that sense, I can say that, of course, India has been a united country de jure, but de facto bringing, the people together and, giving them this sense of purpose, giving them this sense of confidence. I am very hopeful that, what we see these days, these protests and demonstrations and vandalism because of this Agnipath and Agniveer initiative, reform initiative that the government has taken. I hope that will settle down very soon now that from the 22nd and 24th, we will start the recruitment also. So I would say that yes, Prime Minister Modi has come onto the scene when India needed him the most. Like in the case of Bismarck also, he came on the scene when Germany and Europe needed him the most. So Prime Minister Modi has come onto the scene when India and Asia and the world needs him the most. You would recall that when the in-person meeting, the Quad Summit was taking place in Tokyo on the 24th of May, all the other leaders, whether it was Mr. Biden or Mr. Fumio Kishida or Mr. Albanese, Australian Prime Minister, all of them were complimenting and they were applauding Prime Minister Modi for the manner in which he had dealt with the COVID-19 crisis. And also the fact that for the last 2 years, the Indian government has been providing free rations and free food to about 800 million people of the country. And that is what, we have been able to bring, maintain peace and tranquility and stability in the country. So I would tend to agree with you, although I would find that, the challenges that India and Prime Minister Modi faces today, both domestically as well as globally, possibly are more formidable than the challenges that Bismarck might have faced at that time in Europe. But he is handling that very effectively, and I'm sure that the future of the country and the future of peace and stability and security and prosperity in the country and in the region is safe in his hands.
Thanks a lot, sir. Thanks a lot for giving us such invaluable time. My dear viewers, our honored guest, His Excellency, has to attend to some other program. I would just like to make an announcement. On 25th, we have got another distinguished guest, Chancellor of 2 universities, Dr. Trivedi ji, to grace and bless our education pe charcha. My dear viewers, I feel vindicated because none other than a stalwart of foreign policy has justified the very sobriquet or aphorism that I conferred upon the Honorable Prime Minister, especially equating him with that of great Bismarck. So we feel so much thankful to you, and I feel that all IAS aspirants, all foreign policy experts, mandarins in South Bloc, and of course Indian Foreign Services, India, Nepal, across the world, should view this particular video for the greater enlightenment on so many important issues confronting our republic on the foreign policy front. Sir, with my head bowed down, I once again salute you, because I never expected that you would be so staunch in terms of calling a spade, because that is the rarest of rare scenario in today's time. But after knowing you today, I feel that India indeed has a bright future ahead, because Nehruvian secularism is to be given a decent burial. And of course, as what our honorable sir says, that foreign policy has to align with the overall national interest, and that was, we can say, it was given a very decent burial. It was absolutely, it was put to abeyance, and that did a humongous damage to India, to the template of India's overall foreign policy. Even though I had so many questions to ask, but time is a constraining factor, and of course, with my heartest feelings that I would like to express for our honored guest, His Excellency Shri Ashok, Sajjanhar Sahab, that he had considered to my benign request to grace and bless education pe charcha. Thanks a lot, sir. Those who will eventually view this video, it's a plethora of benefits that will ensue to them from, with all sort of enlightening views coming forth or being articulated by such a stalwart of foreign policy in the contemporary context of the country. Thank you, sir. Thanks to all my viewers. Once again, next week, we'll have Dr.
Vivekananda, please convey my thanks to Professor Sajjanhar.
Sir is there. Sir, Dr. Surendra Pathak
Ji, thank you very much.
Sir,
Thank you, Professor.
I'm very sorry. I listened not totally properly. So, but I want to thank you.
Not at all. Thank you very much. I have really enjoyed.
बहुत धन्यवाद.
जी.
फिर कभी किसी प्रोग्राम में मुलाकात होगी. प्रणाम सर.
जी, प्रणाम. बहुत धन्यवाद आपका भी, Professor Vivekananda Jha. I've enjoyed my interaction with you, and I wish you all the very best and all success to you and your team for this very important work that you are doing.
I take your blessing with the head bowed down. Sir, in my upcoming visit to Delhi, I'll make it a point to meet you, sir, and seek your physical.
Absolutely. Look forward. Dhanyavad.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. All the best.